The passing of time brings understanding. We can use the Great Lakes as an example. A curious passerby only has but a few moments, a single look, to form conclusions about the Great Lakes. Conclusions about their temperament and their appearance and their size. Conclusions that residents and frequent visitors get a lifetime to draw. Like a living, breathing being, the Great Lakes only seem to get more complex and more nuanced with each passing minute that we spend with them. The passing of time brings understanding. Hello, and welcome, my freshwater friends, to episode 35 of the About the Water podcast, an exploration of high strangeness on and around the Great Lakes. Today, we onboard on the northeast side of Lake Huron's Georgian Bay and make our way to Sudbury, Ontario. Here, we'll each draw our own conclusions about the strange events that happen about the water. Episode 35. A gate you can't close. You're looking at me like I killed you. I didn't want this. Brielle stood over the two lifeless bodies. I didn't hate you. I know you probably hated me, but I didn't hate you. Either of you. On Brielle's left was her mother. Her cold and disinterested smirk looked even more natural on her posthumously than alive. On her right was her father, wearing that blazer. That same ugly-ass blue blazer that he wore the day he dropped off his only child at college without so much as a hug goodbye. I just needed to find my own way. I needed you. There was no one there to comfort Brielle. Not a neighbor, not a family friend, and with no siblings of their own, the joint funeral service for Brielle's parents was precisely how they would have wanted it. Empty. Only 2 of the 200 pew seats were occupied. One by the minister, whose expression seemed to indicate that he was currently presiding over the most uncomfortable wake of his career. The other was some guy in a cheap suit who hadn't taken his eyes off Brielle since he had walked in. He probably wants something from me, Brielle whispered to herself, before looking over her shoulder at the man and meeting his gaze. She asked him politely,
"What are you looking at, frickin' weirdo?"
Brielle turned back towards her parents' caskets to hide her tears. She then unleashed a long string of obscenities at them before collapsing into a sobbing heap onto the church floor. She could hear the shoddy craftsmanship of the cheap suit man's shoes approaching behind her. Brielle recoiled as she felt his hand on her shoulder. He chuckled, as if expecting that reaction. You must be Brielle. Minutes later, Brielle, the minister, and the cheap suit man all sat in a small office near the entrance of the church. His name was Damon. He was her parents' attorney. He had helped her parents with blah 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 and whatever and all that stuff. Brielle watched the man's mouth moving, but the words seemed muffled, distant, irrelevant. Yak, her parents wanted to be buried at the church's cemetery. Yak, yak, since they both died at the same time, their life insurance policies didn't have to pay out since the spouse is the only beneficiary listed. Yak, yak, yak. They willed that. How did they die? The minister interrupted. Forgive me for asking, I knew them for a long time, and I'm sorry for asking. It's okay, Brielle replied. I was told by the doctor that my father had a heart attack, and when my mom came home to find him, she had one too. The two men lowered their heads. I'm so sorry," the minister offered.
"I'm not,"
Brielle replied curtly. "It's nice to know they had hearts." Brielle was admittedly kind of proud of the following moments of awkward silence. Damon then continued, treading gently. "As we discussed a moment ago, most of the money your parents did have will go to paying their unpaid taxes, miss."
"Tax fraud, gotcha,"
Brielle interjected.
"Please continue."
Damon did. "Yes. After said debts are paid, you'll be left as the only heiress with slightly over 340 Canadian dollars. Brielle rolled her eyes. In truth, even that was more than she expected. But Damon then finished by adding, "And of course the house." Brielle leaned forward in her chair, looking at Damon in disbelief. "They left me the house?" Damon awkwardly shuffled his paperwork and handed a single sheet to Brielle before answering. "Yes, by default, sort of. There is an informal, non-legally binding memorandum left by your father and mother saying that they would prefer the home be donated to the local fire department instead, to be used for..." "For?" Brielle urged. "For acquired structure firefighting training, miss. For practice." Brielle slowly turned her head, looking over her shoulder towards her parents. "They would rather burn down their own house than pass it to their own daughter?" she asked in disgust. Damon stammered, looking at the minister for moral support and receiving only a shrug in return. "Miss, you see, then there's..." Brielle interrupted him. "I'll take it. Where is it?" "I know you didn't want me leaving Sudbury. I know you wanted me to practice law. I know I can be difficult and stubborn, and I know I disappointed both of you." Brielle spoke softly to the front of the home as she observed it from the sidewalk of the residential street. "But I love my work on Manitoulin Island, and I love my work on Lake Huron. I spent last week scuba diving around shipwrecks, and next week I'll be on a deep water trip to Lake Erie and back to study fish populations. And you know what? I love it. I'm happy. It makes me happy. Why? Why couldn't you just want that for me?"
Careful going in there, miss. That is a gate you can't close once you open it."
Taken off guard, Brielle spun around to see an oddly dressed man wearing a black, old-timey three-piece suit with a matching fedora. The shaggy white hair sticking out from underneath it, paired with his bold but sunken green eyes, gave the impression that he had recently celebrated his couple hundredth birthday. Brielle turned back to the small plastic fence that surrounded the house and explained to the man, "They're not there anymore. This is actually my home now, and I do have a key, and besides, When she turned back around to face the man, he was gone. "Okay, get yourself together, Brielle," she said, leaving the gate open as she approached the front door and turned the key. Brielle's parents' house was just like Brielle's parents. Reserved, neutral, cold. The ranch-style home was sparsely furnished. The walls were grayish-blue. The furniture was grayish-blue. Every lamp, table, and chair, all utilitarian in nature. There was nothing decorative. No art. No photos. Except one. What the... As Brielle entered the living room, she noticed the anomaly on the long, huge, windowless wall. Just below the peak of the vaulted ceiling, at perfect eye level for Brielle, was a single portrait. It sat awkwardly in a tiny golden frame, only a few inches tall by a couple inches wide. Inside was a small photo, about the size that someone would keep in a wallet. Brielle had to approach the frame to see who it was. And as she did, any unease that Brielle had from being in the home was washed away in a wave of equal parts anger and sadness. The portrait was of her. She was wearing a graduation cap and gown that weren't in her university colors. She was holding a law degree that she never earned from the University of Toronto, which she never attended. You monsters. You absolute monsters. The crashing from the kitchen directly behind her sent a startling jolt through Brielle as she turned around to face it. The open layout of the home provided her with an immediate view of the kitchen in its entirety, and like the rest of the house, nothing was out of place. Uncomfortably not out of place. Not a broken dish on the floor, not a knocked-over pot or pan, not a shard of a broken glass to be seen anywhere. Realizing that her own breathing was making her lightheaded, Brielle tried to forcefully slow herself down. She assured herself it was probably just a critter, and probably from a different room. And the house had been vacant for about Once again, Brielle froze. The sudden pounding noise seemed to come from directly beneath her feet. Without moving her body an inch, she glanced at the lock on the back door, the nearest exit. She listened for any indication of who or what might be in the home. She hadn't really made any noise coming inside, so maybe her presence had yet to be undetected. As she studied her options, she noticed a wispy, white figure rising up in front of her, followed by another and another. It was her own breath. As soon as she set her attention to the temperature, Brielle realized it was cold, very cold, freezing. The home had gone from uncomfortably hot and humid and stagnant to ice cold in the matter of a couple of minutes. Brielle shivered, deciding to remain completely silent and make her way to the front door. It was mid-afternoon. It was sunny. There would be people outside that she could run to for help and safety. As she began to tiptoe, Brielle whispered to her parents, "Fine, they can burn it down. If there's anything else you want to tell me, now's the time." Brielle didn't need to look to know exactly what that sound was. As she passed into the living room with soft footsteps, she confirmed that her suspicion was correct. The small portrait had fallen off the wall. For a moment, she considered stopping to inspect it, until... Turning towards the front door, Brielle's silent footsteps turned into a full-out sprint, as the entire home seemed to breathe. A strong gust of wind began to rush down the hallway, almost knocking Brielle off her feet. Within seconds, she had made it out the front door, down the walkway, and through the front gate. And now, she found herself face to face with the old man. "Miss," he said, shuffling across the road and fanatically waving for her to follow him. His look was one of genuine concern, so Brielle did. The old man kindly held his umbrella over Brielle as she turned towards the home. "Miss, are you all right? Are you injured? My wife's a nurse, was a nurse. She can... Brielle made a calming motion with her hand, indicating that she was okay. I didn't know what to do, miss, so I called 911, the man explained. Brielle leaned over to catch her breath as the man continued. "I heard your screams from inside the house. When I heard the first one, I wasn't sure what it was, so I came over to check, and I could hear you screaming in the living room. I didn't know what to do, so I called 911. They said they'll be here in a minute. I'm sorry, I didn't know what to do." Brielle objected. I didn't scream. I barely spoke inside. I mean, nobody screamed." She stepped back from the man, and when he tried to follow her with the umbrella, she motioned for him to stay where he was at. "Who are you?" The man looked embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry, miss. I'm Charles, the neighbor. I live right over there." He motioned towards another home with a wave, where an elderly woman was standing under a front porch awning. With a relieved smile, she waved back and went inside. "You're more than welcome to come inside. Dry yourself off. I'll talk to the police when they arrive," he offered. With a shiver and a thank you, Brielle accepted. The home of Charlie and his wife was just like Charlie and his wife. Warm and inviting, full of character. There were shades of gold and pea green everywhere. Floral patterns adorned every square inch of upholstery, and the cherry on top was the lovely antique tea set from which Charlie poured them a cup of chamomile. "I don't mean to pry as to your business at the home, miss, but can you tell me by chance when the owners will return?" Charlie asked. Brielle sighed. "Were you close?" Charlie couldn't hide his sadness. He looked at his tea and nodded yes, pointing out, "You used the word were, miss, so I have to assume they're either gone for good or they're gone for good." Brielle put a hand on his shoulder to comfort him. "They passed a week ago, yesterday, sir. I'm sorry, that's why you haven't seen them for a week." The man looked back up. "Oh dear, I haven't seen them in months." Brielle was taken back, asking, "Months? Where were they?" Charlie went on, "I don't know. I tell you, that house always did give me the creeps. And you know something? I think it scared them too. One time I noticed their lights are on in the middle of the night, and they were rushing out to their car in their pajamas. And, I haven't seen them since." The old man paused and suddenly smiled. "You're Brielle, aren't you?" He knew, without her having to confirm, that he was indeed correct. "Your parents were very proud of you, young lady. They bragged about you constantly, to everybody." Brielle laughed. "Yeah, I bet they did. Did they tell you all about my time at University of Toronto and my wonderful career at the law firm? You know, I'd be curious to know if I made partner." Charlie gave Brielle a puzzled look. "Oh, they never mentioned a law degree. They said many times that you were out there doing important work on Lake Huron. It was research, wasn't it? Yeah, they said they were proud of you, that you wanted to keep this place beautiful." To this day, Brielle and Charlie remain close friends. When I asked her if she kept the house, she literally laughed out loud and simply replied, "F that." As curious as she is to see if the photo is still laying on the floor, she did tell me she hasn't set foot back in the home since. Brielle did try to sell the home, and after several rounds of buyers inexplicably canceled the purchase during the inspection period, she decided to donate it to the city. And even though these strange events took place years before Brielle shared her experience with me, as of the publishing of this episode, the home remains unoccupied. As I'm sure you noticed during the story, in terms of inconsistencies, there are many. To this day, Charlie insists that he heard several rounds of screaming from inside the home, and he is sure that it was from that specific home. Meanwhile, Brielle is 100% sure that she never once emitted anything louder than a whisper. Charlie did say that he heard the crashing of what he describes as the entire kitchen being knocked over, and while he didn't hear the various other thuds that Brielle heard, He did distinctly remember seeing Brielle's breaths as she ran out the door, despite the outside temperature having been well over 25 degrees Celsius, or 77 degrees Fahrenheit, for weeks. The inquiry that I was most eager to have answered, and maybe you were thinking the same thing when you heard it, was in regards to Charlie's strange comment about the gate. When he first met Brielle, he said, "That's a gate you can't close once you open it." Well, you may be disappointed to hear that he was literally just talking about the front gate. The gate was just tricky to close. That's it. Strangely, however, Brielle distinctly remembers that conversation happening beneath a sunny sky, while Charlie knows it was raining because he had his umbrella up. What Brielle and Charlie both agree on entirely is that they experienced the same paranormal event, only differently. Because of these differences, the skeptics among us might simply draw the not unreasonable conclusion that both Brielle and Charlie are simply wrong. So, we're each left asking ourselves what actually happened. Might I be so bold as to propose to you that all of it actually happened? One paranormal theory which has gained ground in recent years might help shine some light on this particular instance of high strangeness. The working hypothesis is that these experiences do, in fact, just happen entirely within the person's own mind. As those of us who've had a paranormal experience are often told, it's all in your head. Well, it would turn out in this sense, the skeptics are kind of right. This theory argues that even though the perception of the event is unique from individual to individual, the event still did actually happen. The event triggered impulses, senses were stimulated, and genuine input was received. So it wasn't a delusion. Paranormal events could be, in fact, deliberate. If the same event can trigger two different experiences in two different people, maybe the phenomenon is intentionally there to give them something they need. After all, it seems that this mysterious chain of events was successful in passing along an important message from two deceased parents that they were in fact very proud of their daughter. In terms of Brielle and Charlie and their so-called inconsistencies, the two came together for their conversation that would change Brielle's life because they each experienced the same paranormal event differently. So, in conclusion, what's your conclusion? Was this a deliberate, warm, and loving message from Brielle's parents? Or was their desire to see their daughter never set foot in the home and to see the home burned to the ground their way of making sure to protect their daughter from whatever experience drove them out of the home that evening? It looks like all we can do is wait. Wait and see if, in fact, the passing of time brings understanding. And with that, thank you, sincerely, for listening. If there's someone that you're thankful for or proud of, then maybe this experience belongs to you as well. And today's the day to make sure they know just to what extent you are. And here's hoping that all of the relationships that you cherish in this life are as grand, beautiful, and enduring as our Great Lakes. I'll see you about the water.